Welcome to the Good Growing Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator with the University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Macomb, Illinois, and we have got a great show for you today, Season Extension, taking the shoulders of the growing season and pushing things out to there and maybe even beyond. And you know I'm not doing this by myself. I'm joined, as always, every single week by horticulture educator Ken Johnson in Jacksonville. Hey, Ken.
Hello, Chris. Finally starting to cool off.
Hopefully. It got cold last night. Yes.
It's finally time for that season extension stuff now.
I think so. Yes. Well, the predicted low last night was 30 degrees. And I saw that and I said, okay, I'm going to go out. I have all my poblanos, I have my tomatoes, I have everything that's just sort of been sitting there. And I harvested everything last night, pulled it out, brought my rosemary inside, and it did not get down to freeze. There were some roofs this morning that had a little bit of frost on them, but nothing on the ground. Nothing there. So that's okay. That's okay. I'm okay with, I'm done. This is, I'm done gardening. So the year is done for me. Did you get any frost last night in Jacksonville?
There's a little, we've had a pillow on the deck drying, and there's some frost on that this morning. But looking at lunch, it looks like tomato plants are still fine.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Everything is fine. Everything is fine. I probably could have left it on there because now we're supposed to get a little bit warmer again. And so I probably could have pushed a little bit longer, but you know what? I think at least tomatoes, the ones that I harvest late in the season that have been exposed to a lot of cold, I don't think they taste as good as those that are growing in the summer. Do you notice any texture or taste difference in your fall tomatoes versus summer?
Usually by the time fall rolls around, I'm so sick of tomatoes.
Yes. I just throw them at the kids. Yes. We take them to plays and we throw them at the actors. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I haven't, so we still have the purple tomato pudding stuff on, and I've picked some, and they're just sitting on the counter. I haven't tried one yet.
Yeah. I tried one the other night. It did not taste as good as the summertime harvest. So yeah, the remainder of my purple tomato are going to seed, which I've done multiple times, and my wife keeps throwing out my seed thinking that it's like what is all this stuff on this paper towel, or why do you have this jar of mold on the kitchen counter? I'm trying to save tomato seeds, but
I have to do it in the office.
I know I have to do it here. Oh my goodness. Well, I guess we should dive into the topic of the day, because that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about gardening this time of year and what to do. Now, I have for several years, Ken, I've done many of these practices before. Only recently, maybe the last year or two, have I really kind of put the brakes on when it comes to season extension. I guess I just get tired of gardening. Like you said, tomatoes don't taste as good anymore. You want to do something else. But yeah, what's your experience with season extension?
So a little bit for the ginger stuff we were doing, but other than that, like in personal garden, we'll cover plants with a blanket. And that's about it. We've talked about it, but it's one of those things. Fall gets so busy that by the time things start slowing down again, it's almost too late to do it. So it doesn't get down.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I think we're in the same boat. There's all these, not only does school start, all the other school related activities start as well. And you just run out of time by the end of the week. So I think it might be a good time then. Let's define what season extension really is, as we keep talking about it. Ken, could you illuminate us, please?
Yes. So like you mentioned, working on those shoulders. So kind of early in the year, later in the year, when typically, I think usually more warm season crops, but even cool season crops, just being able to grow those longer or earlier in the season than we typically would, capturing the heat that we get during the day through various structures or materials, capturing that and holding that on through the night when we get those colder temperatures, and that can radiate from it's in the air, it's in the soil, and capturing that heat to allow those plants to survive conditions they may not be able to. This is kind of how I think it. Just
Yeah.
keep that gardening season going a little bit longer than you would normally be able to.
Mhm. Yeah, you're catching photons, as I like to say, capturing sunlight and converting it into heat energy. And when you look at graphs of kind of the ambient air temperature on outside of these structures versus the air temperature on the inside, when you start out the night, they're usually way up there, much higher than the nighttime temperatures outside. But as without the sunlight actively warming that structure, the two lines very often come very close together towards dawn. And really, the goal of anyone using season extension is really just making sure that you keep that inside air temperature from hitting, freezing or sub-freezing temperatures, um, and just give it a little extra ounce of protection.
Yeah, I think usually you're extending it a couple weeks,
Mhm.
maybe a month if you're lucky. You're not without providing supplemental lighting and stuff like that. We're not going to be doing this. Well, you can do it, but your plants aren't going to be actively growing because
Mhm.
once we hit about 10 hours of daylight, plants once you get less than that, plants don't really put on any growth. They just kind of sit there. Um, and if we're here, we just looked this up before we started. For Jacksonville, our last day for 10 hours of sunlight is going to be November 14th, and we will not hit 10 hours of day length again until January 27th. So, you know, rest of November into almost the end of January. If we are keeping plants warm enough to keep them alive, they're just kind of sitting there. They're not necessarily actively putting on new growth. So you'd be able to kind of hold a crop, but we're not necessarily producing a lot more of it.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's kind of the one of the drawbacks, if it is a drawback, is that people think, oh, I will be actively growing these crops in the winter months. Like I will plant a seed right now in November and I will have something to harvest in January, February. And that's really not the case. Um, a lot of these crops need to be started well before today. So like in what we're recording November 12th, let's see, November 12th is actually where I'm at here in Macomb, our last 10-hour day of daylight. And so we will not get above the 10-hour mark here in Macomb until we reach January 29th. And so it is, this is, you provided a website where people can type in their location data, Ken, and folks want to, they can look up their own uh, daylight or also measures darkness too, whatever you want.
Yes, it's the U.S. Navy Astronomical Applications Department, and you can
Hmm.
just put in your longitude and latitude. And if you don't know what that is, they've got a little thing you can put your city in there, and they'll plug it in for you, and it'll tell you how many hours of daylight or night you have or darkness for every single day of the year. You can do it back to 1700, and as far in advance as 2100.
I could probably spend some time looking at it. This is folks. This is literally a chart of numbers. This is nothing fancy. There's no fancy graphic, but I think this is so cool, especially when you look at the solstice time frames. So, I grew up thinking, oh, winter solstice, that is the shortest day of the year. Summer is the longest day. But when I look at these numbers, it's really interesting. It's like when the Earth's axis hits its maximum, it sort of like sits there for several days. And so we have from December, and here in Macomb, we have from December 17th until December 25th. Those are the shortest days of the year. It's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days where it is at 9 hours and 17 minutes. It's like we're just sitting there at that maximum point, and then the Earth pivots back in the other direction. And it does the same thing with the summer solstice. So here I thought December 21st was the shortest day of the year. It's actually a span of days that are the shortest. So I could look at this all day, Ken.
So it only does the minutes. Maybe it's actually a few seconds shorter.
Yeah, yeah. Well, now you burst my bubble. Okay, I
we,
got you.
we can cut that part out. Pretending a
Don't
friend.
cut that part out. No, that's an important learning experience. Yeah, we grow from our what we've learned here. Well, good point. Yes, this is minutes, doesn't include seconds. There is probably tiny little fractions
In the
difference
grand
here.
scheme of things, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, your plant probably doesn't care that much in terms of seconds, but minutes, definitely hours. That does impact them quite a bit. Well, Ken, when I am growing things for my in my season extension experience, I've not really ever been growing tomatoes or like cucumbers. It has been a serious effort of growing cool season crops and not those warm season crops. But I would say season extension in the springtime for me, that would probably involve utilizing more warm season crops, maybe getting an area prepped, warming that soil ahead of time. So maybe I could transplant tomato starts sooner than if I didn't have a season extension device over it. But when it comes to fall, like we've both said, we're kind of sick and tired of those warm season crops. I am of the opinion that fall or cool season crops taste better when they're growing in the fall because as we get cooler, those crops produce more sugars. It's like the natural antifreeze. I just think they taste better. Like even kale can taste good as it gets hit by a little bit of cold there. Yeah. Oh, you think that's funny. I think this kale can taste good sometimes. It's a little bit sweeter, but spinach definitely gets tastes better. Carrots can taste better.
Mhm.
A lot of these crops, these cool season crops, I think the cooling weather enhances their flavor. So that's the types of crops that I try to focus on with season extension.
Yeah, I think I've seen, there's charts and stuff out there for, which ones do well. And yeah, spinach is always on there because that's very cold hardy. I mean, that can take a harder frost on its own and don't necessarily need the
Mhm.
protection. Parsnips are on there usually. Um, Carrots was, I think that the tops can handle like 10 degrees. The roots themselves can get down into the 30s. So,
Mhm.
so yeah,
Yeah.
it's, you almost kind of, for some of them, it's almost, if you're extending, that's almost like just building a giant refrigerator, kind of, and
Mhm.
just lengthening that harvest.
You're just trying to keep the snow off them so you can harvest them or pick them whenever you feel like it. Now, I would say it is recommended whenever you're harvesting crops in the winter, you want to try to avoid harvesting them while they're frozen. It's like spinach, it will freeze and it will wilt. Um, and same with some kale and things like that. But as soon as it gets above freezing, the water in the leaves rehydrates the cells and the plant perks back up. And so you can harvest then. So that would be one piece of advice is avoid harvesting while the plants are frozen. It can be freezing outside, but still be above freezing in your season extension device. So you can still do it, but there's something to be mindful of too.
So get into the different devices now.
I
So,
guess so. If people really want to know what season extension devices are, yeah, we should probably do that. Yes.
so I think the first one we have on our list are cloches,
Hmm.
which I think is French for bell
Yeah.
or something like that.
Those they're like these big glass look bell looking things that they used to put over plants. Hmm.
Just that was, I think that was, originally that was your more wealthy people doing that because they could afford these big glass bells to cover. And usually with cloches, a lot of times you're doing them on individual plants. So if you've got 25, um, whatever broccoli plants, probably not the most practical way. Those are gonna be some pretty big cloches too. But nowadays, you can still find the glass ones. There's plastic ones. I've seen soda pop bottles, whatever you want to call it, 2 liter, 3 liter bottles, milk cartons, um, like wax paper. People make cones out of those and put it over there. The wall of water. You
Hmm.
may see that. That's like plastic sleeves that you fill with water. A lot of times you use that more in the. I see it advertised more for like spring, like tomatoes, getting tomatoes out early, where you fill that with water. That water traps some of that heat and releases that throughout the night, keeps those tomato plants a little bit warmer. So there's a variety of different ways you can use use and materials you can use for cloches.
Yeah. I always thought the wall of waters were interesting. It does make sense because it takes more energy to heat up water, which means it would take longer for that heat to dissipate from that water. So, and again, it might work out too in that case because we're really, I mean, we're talking about just like 1 or 2 degrees worth of protection really by the end of the night as we approach dawn. That's really the critical moment, making sure that we're just a little bit higher than that outside temperature, that we're not um, hitting either that freeze point, with when it comes to like tomatoes and peppers, you really don't want to dip into freezing weather, minus 32 degrees Fahrenheit. But some of our cool season crops, as we've already described, they can tolerate freezing or below freezing, but they all do have their thresholds. A lot of times for some of those cool season crops, it really does vary and depend. But like with our spinaches and our carrots and some of our kales, we're looking at like 20 degrees Fahrenheit. If we dip down below that and we're in the open, we're not in any protected structure, they could also start seeing damage, dying, things like that. So yeah, research your individual crops to know what those minimum temperature thresholds are. And yeah, I was thinking I
And
had a chart, but I don't think I have a chart. Never mind. Don't put that in there because I don't have a chart to show people. That's mine. It belongs to Johnny Seed.
and with cloches and when we get into some of these other ones too, well, for cloches because they're usually smaller and you're doing one plant, make sure it's heavy enough or it's anchored so it's not going to get blown off. And you've got a way, if you're using like a milk crate or milk carton, you can cut the bottom up, put the top on. You can take that cap off and help kind of vent that, and then put that cap on at night. But having a way that you can open it up and close it up so that during the day, if it warms up quite a bit, you're not capturing too much heat,
Mm.
and then cooking your plants.
Yeah. Yeah. Even with these small little cloches, you get into temperature management, and that high temperatures can be an issue. If you not only can you protect it from the cold, but you can cook them from the sun. So, yep, got to manage those temperatures and keep an eye on things. That was the biggest part of when I, did season extension. It was always watching the temperature, knowing if it was going to be a sunny day or a cloudy day, and then um, checking the news to see if there were any reports of giant pieces of plastic flying across the highway because my high tunnel was destroyed in a windstorm or something. Those were always, I woke up every morning, I did that. So that was my routine. Maybe that's why I don't do it as much anymore. Oh, goodness. Well, but Ken, there are way more things that we can do. I would say probably one of the ones that most people do now, this does count as season extension, is some type of a floating row cover. And by that, we mean you're just putting like a sheet over a garden bed. And you would anchor it down, staple it down, or weigh it down with something. And this can be something that I know a lot of us probably have lying around the house, a bed sheet. And essentially, this is just fabric that is porous that you could usually the way to do this is you would lift that bed sheet off of the crop to expose the soil to the sunlight. The soil warms up. Then as the sun sets, you put the bed sheet back over, traps that heat closer to the ground, allows those plants to stay a little bit warmer than they would if they were uncovered. Um, if you don't want to ruin your nice Egyptian linens, and your 1,000 thread count sheets that we all I'm sure have, the yeah. Let's be honest. I got the dinosaur bed sheets here. So the the industry does have specific materials that commercial growers use. You can use this in the backyard garden. It's actually pretty convenient. It's called row cover. Um, a lot of times it's also called kind of by like the brand name. And so, but row cover is what you would be searching for. And what this is it's a poly spun fiber fabric. Poly being plastics, the fibers. You can see the individual strands of fibers in there. And what it does is it is like the bed sheet. It is porous. It does allow water and air flow through it. It does allow some light through it, and there are different weights or grades of row cover that, will allow more or less light. Of course, the ones that allow more light don't offer as much insulation. The ones that are a bit more darkening, they are a bit more higher rated in insulative value. So it kind of depends on the crop you're growing, how much protection you need, depending on your geography, the type of weather that you get. So I like row cover. I got a big old roll of it in my garage. I do deploy it every so often. I do try to save it when I can, because being made of plastic fibers, I don't want to necessarily just trash it every time I use it. It's not like a single use thing. It's not like using paper towels or something, so they can be reused, and I try to reuse them as often as I can.
Yeah, with those, and depending on where you buy them, they'll usually be like heavy or,
Mhm.
and some of those, the heavier ones advertised down into the 20s. I think usually, depending on the type, was it 2 to 6, maybe a little more degrees protection is what you can get. And some of the really light ones you can use even in the summer for like insect protection.
Yeah.
So if you're growing um, cabbage or kale, any of the brassicas, and you want to cover those, you don't have to worry about caterpillars. You can get some of these lighter ones and keep your butterflies and moths off of it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point. And that can even help you grow the cool season crops during the hotter months. Now we're kind of doing the opposite effect here, where it's hotter outside and we're using that row cover now as more of a shade cloth device in those instances. And also, hey, keep some insects off too. So, um, yeah, that's why I say, try to reuse some of these products as much as you can, especially when we talk about plastic, using plastic in the landscape. I try to minimize it as much as possible, but it's so hard now because lots of really nice products are made of plastic.
Yeah, and I may skip order on this and go to low tunnels next,
Go
because
for
low
it.
tunnels are basically just floating row cover with a frame.
Hmm.
So you're graduating a little bit here and building. A lot of times it's going to be like a metal wire, and you can buy these or you can make your own. It's just making little hoops, putting those in the ground, and then putting your floating row cover over that hoop. With that, you're capturing more air in there. You're getting it up off the plants. Sometimes if it's resting on the plants, that cold can transfer a little bit easier through there. So it's ideally up off the plants. You got a bigger area protecting more air mass in there, which is going to make it take it a little bit longer to cool off. You're not buying all kinds of time, all kinds of heat, but
Hmm.
maybe a little bit extra.
Yeah. You have that, yeah, that increase of airspace, that insulation. It does buy you a little bit more. I agree. And if people want to know, I shudder to do this, but I did make a video about how to make your own low tunnel hoops. I shudder because it was many years ago, and I haven't watched that video in a long time, and I'd probably be like, oh boy, I don't know what I was talking about then. But yes, I will share a link to that below in the description about how to build your own low tunnel hoops. I think I use like an actual pipe bender that I bought. Um, and you buy these benders based upon how wide of a garden bed that you have. You don't necessarily need to buy one of those pipe benders, though. You can go online and also find other videos that show you how to make a jig for certain sizes of pipes and how wide you want them. So yeah, there's a lot of information about how to do this yourself online. I'll link my very own video below for that.
Yes, and there are places that sell pre-bent and everything
Hmm.
too. If you want to spend a little extra money and don't want to deal with doing it yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Ken, does that mean if we graduated from row cover to low tunnel, we need to now go right up into the high tunnel?
Why not?
Because yes, there are a few more things involved, but to me, a high tunnel is just a low tunnel blown up, bigger. It's really the same shape, same structure. Whereas a low tunnel, I guess you could crawl in it, but normally you just take the covering off and you walk along it. The high tunnel, you walk into it and you can stand up and you can work in there all while it's snowing around you. And I have done that several times before. It's actually a lot of fun to do in the middle of winter. Um, but a high tunnel is essentially, again, just these metal conduit that is bent in this hoop shape. And really, where we're at in Illinois, we have two choices in terms of our roof on these high tunnels. You can have a kind of a Quonset roof, which is just it's just rounded at the top, or you can have a Gothic peak roof, which a lot of people, at least in central and on up into northern Illinois, will opt for because the peak of that roof allows snow to shed off more. Um, and that is something which can help relieve snow load, which is something you have to think about with these. And so, but yes, your roof lines can vary, but it's essentially this metal pipe that is covered in a poly plastic film. Um, it's not the kind of plastic though you buy at the hardware center. You know, this is not the drop cloth you use to keep paint off the carpet when you're painting. This is plastic that has been UV treated so that when it is exposed to sunlight, it does not just evaporate into nothing. Now, a lot of our plastic at, our drop cloths, things like that you buy at the paint store, I know a lot of people have used this before. It barely lasts one winter. Exposure to that UV light, it just starts to degrade right away almost. And so something to be aware of. The other thing, while we're talking about degradation, and that is the use of PVC plastic piping instead of the metal conduit. There are some plastic films that chemically react when it comes in contact with PVC piping, and it will actually erode that where those two meet. It will actually erode. So that's why a lot of times I try to steer people away from the PVC plastic and more towards the metal, either wires for your low tunnels or metal piping, and definitely the metal piping for your high tunnel.
I'm trying to think. So Caterpillar tunnel would be similar to high tunnel. It's just a little less permanent
Yep.
of a structure. And the one we have here in Jackson, we've had that plastic. Was that 3 years now?
Mm-hmm.
It's got some holes in it, but for the most part, it's holding up pretty well. So
Yeah.
you can use this for multiple years.
Mm-hmm. As far as I know, the lifespan of most high tunnel plastic is 7 years. Um, After that, a lot of times it will still work, but it might get all cloudy and more opaque, which means you're getting less sunlight that moves into the structure. So that could do a couple things. One, it can reduce the amount of heating that can occur. Less sunlight getting in, the less light that gets converted to heat energy. You don't heat as effectively. The other thing is your plants aren't getting as much light. So there are a couple reasons why growers will often switch after about 7 years. It's where they typically find that as long as the high tunnel plastic will last them.
Yeah, and then with your high tunnels, you can put a low tunnel within that, or you
Hmm.
can use your floating grow covers. So you can, I guess, stack your season extension techniques here
Hmm.
with some of these bigger ones. So give you a little, maybe not a tremendous amount more, but it'll give you a little bit more heat retention and protection for your crops. And when I think, high tunnel, caterpillar tunnel, those are a little more permanent structures. So if you are going to be doing this, if you've got that plastic on there, rainwater is not getting in. So you're going to have some kind of irrigation or something in there to keep those plants watered. Ben stuff, another one we have here in Jacksonville. We don't grow anything in it during the winter, and when you get out there in the spring, it is very, very dry in there.
Well, and that's true. Like a lot of things happen throughout the winter, including it's sunny out there and it sort of bakes in there. There, as I said before, temperature management is really important. On those sunny days in the winter, even if it's below freezing, I would have to go out and I had a high tunnel and I would have to lift the sides up to vent it so that my plants on the inside would not get too hot. And so you're really doing a lot of temperature management in the winter. Um, Fortunately, I wouldn't have to water as much the plants aren't growing as much, they're not using as much water. And so watering in the winter is not as critical inside of a high tunnel, or even a low tunnel. And so that it wouldn't be as big of a problem in terms of water, but you seal that puppy up all winter long, you show up in the spring, that thing is it's well done inside there.
Yeah, I got a probably it was probably April sometime. We got a thermometer and put it out in ours, and we broke it. It got so hot in
It's
there.
so hot.
It was a min max and did humidity. It was up over 120 degrees, and you open it up as like opening an oven,
Hmm.
and close to 100% humidity because we hadn't killed the grass in there yet. So it's all transpiring, and it was intense going in there when it was all
Yes.
sealed up, and it hadn't opened it up for several days when it was nice sunny days.
Hmm. Yeah. I I would say they are fun and comfortable to work in most days in the winter. When you're in the summer months and you're working in a high tunnel, even with the end walls open and the sides up, you usually have to take breaks and go outside to cool off. Even if it's like 90 some degrees outside, it's still going to be cooler outside than it is in the high tunnel. And so, yeah, growing in a high tunnel in the summer, that's a whole other podcast, I think, that we could probably get into. But um, that the temperature management is critical, and then water management. So, Ken, let's see, how many years have you had that caterpillar tunnel up? Has it been? Did you
3 years now?
say
Is it
3
three
years?
years? I think.
So
Yeah.
one of the issues with prolonged covering of the soil by any structure and using city water, or potable water, not rainwater essentially, um, is the buildup of one, what you could have calcium deposits, things like that in your water, but also a lot of those fertilizers and those other things that you might be adding to the soil. A lot of times this is a buildup of salts, and you wind up getting very salty soil. I visited several high tunnels in the past, and sometimes there's this white film that develops on the top of the soil, and that's the salts that are starting to develop there because they have not been exposed to the natural process of like rainwater falling down and pushing or pulling that salt down into the soil. It just sits there.
Yeah. And we should probably say, high tunnels, caterpillar tunnels is probably not something you're going to do in your typical yard. This is more if you've got, I mean, you could,
Good.
but
Yeah.
it's,
What? Nothing stopping you except for maybe city code or
yeah,
covenants or something. Yeah.
yeah, it's probably something most people are not going to be doing. And I'll say with our caterpillar tunnel, well, that we take the plastic off in the summer, put the shade cloth on, so it's cool in there. So for us, we're not having to worry about the salts and stuff because we're still getting that natural rain fall and all that in there.
Hmm. Did we describe the difference between caterpillar and high tunnel?
It's not as
Maybe
permanent.
it's not
We
as
could
permanent. Yeah.
go into more detail if you want.
Yeah, I guess maybe just the thing is like caterpillar, kind of the name says it, it moves, it can move. It is the posts of the frame are not um as permanent. For like your caterpillar, Ken, it's rebar that we've hammered into the ground, and then we slid a metal pipe over top of that. And we could just pick it up and move it if we wanted to, and put rebar in a different part of the ground.
Yeah. Whereas low tunnel is a little more,
Mhm.
or not low tunnel, high tunnel
High tunnel.
was a little more permanent.
Now there are high tunnels that are built
Chicken.
on rails, and
Hmm.
they will roll them, and that helps to address some of the crop rotation issues, which we haven't discussed, but also then addressing some of those salt buildup issues in those soils. So it allows them to actually physically roll their high tunnel to a new growing area, and allows the other one either to rest, grow a different crop, go fallow, anything like that. So it's in a perfect world, yeah, we would have movable high tunnels, and we could let that soil take a break for a season or two.
Do greenhouses.
Oh,
Another one that's, again, probably not practical for most people. So greenhouses this would be like your controlled environment agriculture. So with this, it's basically you could have a high tunnel and make it a greenhouse, but you're automating. You got heat sources. The main thing is providing heat in some way. That's propane or wood burning stove or something like that.
Mhm.
A lot of them will have ways to um, open and close automatically. You can do that. You can automate a lot more of this stuff. So it's going to cost a lot more, but it's also going to take less of your time to kind of manage that greenhouse. Still have to check it every once in a while and make sure it's working and stuff. And these are definitely permanent structures.
Yes, you are building a building. Usually, you're pouring a concrete pad, um, and so yeah, I would say the major difference I usually tell people is what you described, Ken, is that it has an alternative heat source other than the sun, and I think it's usually the cost, which steers a lot of our growers away from having an actual greenhouse. Because if you think about what it takes to the cost of heating your home in the winter, you know, imagine the cost of heating a greenhouse and trying to grow a crop that you can then sell and make money on. Well, then that's going to be some pretty expensive lettuce. So, because it takes a lot of fuel to keep things warm, at least here in our part of Illinois in the winter. And so it's really that heating cost that really keeps people away from greenhouses in particular. And a lot of folks really opt for more of those passive solar heating options like high tunnels, low tunnels, floating row covers, cloches, all those types of things.
Yeah, and I think typically with greenhouses, if you're going to be spending that money to heat it, people are probably getting supplemental lighting in there so you can grow year round to kind of
Mhm.
justify that cost of building that and keeping it heated and all of that.
I mean, it is a life goal of mine. I do want a greenhouse. Um, when I was a kid, my grandma had a greenhouse that was attached to their home. That was it was like magical going in. There was like oranges, there was a lime tree, there was all these kind of tropical fruits growing in Illinois. It takes me back to think about it. And then she would open the door of the greenhouse and it would just smell like citrus and plants in the wintertime. It's a life goal of mine. I'd love to have a detached greenhouse on my
Like
on my own house, but
a lean-to greenhouse.
yep. Yeah, I'm trying to win that lottery. Trying. Yep. Well, there is one more season extension device, like a structure that we can use. I think that some homeowners I've seen them definitely deploy in their yard, and that is using a cold frame, which is really just it's essentially a box and it's angled, and that the angle is facing the south. So, as the sun gets lower in the sky in the winter months, we use that angle to try to intercept as much sunlight as possible into this box with this kind of clear cover on it. Could be plastic, hard plastic, plastic film, could be glass, old reused windows, things like that. But yeah, cold frame is something that I have grown in a few times, and it's actually a lot of fun to grow in, something small like this. And I think I have a few pictures that I'll send to you, Ken, to throw in right here. We've grown turnips, we've grown bok choy, we've grown a kale, spinach, lots of different crops in our cold frame, and it's literally just it's like a wedge shaped box made out of cedar wood, and it's got a poly hard plastic clear lid on top that we open up. So, and we do have a little heat kind of air vent register on the back so it can vent air if it gets a little too hot in there. But yeah, I do like growing in my cold frame.
So you use that primarily in the spring, or you use it in the fall too?
It's primarily in the fall. That's what I prefer. Now, in the spring, it is more for hardening off seedlings or protecting them of like our warm season stuff, our tomatoes, peppers, things like that. So they can go from the basement into the cold frame, um, bring them outside of the cold frame, even get some wind, get some direct sun exposure, put them back into that more sheltered cold frame, and that's how we can harden things off a little bit better. But yeah, fall, just throw some turnip seeds in there. Turnips at Thanksgiving, delicious. My favorite thing.
So I've even read about people just using straw bales, putting
Hmm.
a piece of plastic or something over that. Several years ago, we got a bunch of windows, They're from an old house. Pretty sure it's lead paint. So I was working on cleaning one up and got almost done, and the glass broke, and I
Oh,
got very angry, and I have not done the rest of them since because I spent so much time trying to get that paint off and
He's like, I
scraping and
can't.
heat gun, and
No lead in the garden. Got to keep it out. Oh man, that stinks.
it almost broke me.
Well, I think maybe I can get you my. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I might have one extra you can use. I'll have to go find it though.
So I have like four more windows. I just
Hmm.
the one experience scarred me. One of these
Yeah.
days I'll get back to cleaning them up.
So, and there's an additional strategy with cold frames, and that is where you can convert it into a hot frame, or I think they also call it like a hot bed or something like that. And that is where you actually will bury some composting material. Could be, I guess, manures, could be yard waste, leaves, grass clippings, things like that. It allows it to compost as it's buried sort of in the back. That generates heat, kind of artificial, well, not artificially, I guess more naturally, heats up the interior of that structure. I've even seen people that will put a sand base down and put some heating coils underneath there. That's more for the serious gardener, seed starter. Um, a lot of people even use that to propagate like woody cuttings to like root cuttings in that type of situation. So um, I think cold frames are really versatile, and like you said, they can be built out of anything. So if you want to dip your toe into pushing that season a little bit beyond what you normally grow, maybe a cold frame would be a good place to start.
Yeah. Could be the beginning of your greenhouse journey with your hot frame.
Exactly. Yes, yes. If we all demand greenhouses, that should lower the price, right? No. Is that how supply and demand works? Oh no, no. Only I get the greenhouse then. Um, yes. Well, Ken, we also mentioned this though. Like this is a type of season extension. It's just starting your seeds inside. Just like you're gonna push that season a little bit earlier than if you just sowed everything direct into the ground.
Yeah, I mean, you figure with, yeah, especially like your warm season stuff. I mean, you figure you're starting your tomatoes, well, depending on the person, 6 weeks early. So
Hmm.
you're getting a month and a half jump just by starting that stuff inside. Or if you direct seed that tomato outside mid to late May,
Yeah.
maybe you get some tomatoes depending on the cultivar you're growing. So
But then you would need season extension for the fall
yes,
so you could get a tomato.
yeah, I think that's one. I'd say a lot of people that garden are doing season extension. They just don't realize it because we don't think of indoor seed starting as season extension.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I agree. Or yeah, uh, that is totally a season extension. Have some type of an environment that you are protecting those plants, and it gets you a jump on the growing season. Yeah.
Or lets you grow stuff you wouldn't be able to otherwise grow because the season's
Mhm.
too short.
Mhm. Well, that was a lot of great information about how we can push our growing season, whether we want to grow warmer season crops longer into the year, or we want to start our cool season crops and grow them perhaps even throughout the winter. Well, the Good Growing Podcast is a production of University of Illinois Extension, edited this week by Ken Johnson. Hey, Ken, thank you so much for chatting about season extension with me today. Appreciate seeing you. And I guess it's going to be cold soon. We'll get that frost eventually. But yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah, trying to kill our tomatoes here.
maybe someday, possibly. It's not, once those tomatoes die, I can start cleaning up those windows again. Get my
There you
cold frame
go.
for the spring.
I'll get you a paint scraper for Christmas.
And let's do this again next week.
Oh, we shall do this again next week. Hey, we got a couple garden bites headed your way because we got all kinds of fun things coming up. We're going to go see some poinsettias. We're going to go eat some turkey. We're going to have a great couple of weeks coming up here at the end of November. So, listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, watching. And as always, keep on growing. Oh, I'm still recording. Well, there we go. End that now. All right.